Okay, so we are in module 3, when and how to apply and how often can you apply. Now, let me say this and then I'll break it all down as we move forward. When to apply, there are two ways that the schedule works to make your application. And then there are really two ways that you can apply, two broad ways. Okay, so two broad wins and two broad hows. Here is the how. Do that one first. Uh, some grant makers are going to say, hey, send that thing in the mail. Send it to this P.O. box or to this office, and it needs to be postmarked or hand delivered by this date. Send it in the mail. Others are going to say, we prefer an online application. Increasingly, more and more are moving towards online, but we'll highlight it right here in this note at the bottom of the screen. Follow the guidelines per each grant maker. There are, you can say this, the largest grants that we have received in the past 2 years have not been online. The largest grants that we've received have been sent in the mail and or hand delivered. So both of these are important. Both of them are absolutely essential. Now that you know the how they do it, and you know both of these are important, let me tell you when you can do it. There are two primary ways that you can do these grants. The first is this: anytime applications. There are some grant makers out there that will say, "Hey, we'll take the grant anytime you want to bring it, anytime you want to send it, send it." And then our board will look at it. Generally, um, those tend to be family foundations. They'll say send it at any time. Others will say send it at any time, but just know their board's going to look at it. They meet the first week of each quarter, and then they make decisions. And so just be sure you get it in by then, but you can send it anytime. And then there are going to be other grant makers that say specific times. Now, those specific times could be quarterly, they could be twice a year, they might even be random. In fact, there's a local grant maker, let me highlight that one. It seems random, but it makes sense to them. They take in Birmingham, Alabama, it's an insurance company that has a nonprofit charitable wing. They take grants in February, they take them in April, they take them in October. I have no idea how they picked those dates. Seems random, but I'm sure it's based on something in their workflow that really makes sense if you got inside the organization. There's a big foundation in town in Birmingham that takes grants every March and every September. And so you just know, hey, that's when they do it. There are others that take them once a year. That's it. Now, I do want to highlight at the bottom, there are a few grant makers that work on an invite only protocol. And that means they may have a specific date when you apply, but they've got to give you access to their online portal. And if you don't get the access from them, you don't get in. Or it may not be they have an online portal. It might be that you got to mail it, but they might say, "Hey, we don't accept unsolicited grants. Like you can't just send it." So you want to pay attention to all of this, and you want to begin putting it in a spreadsheet. In fact, that leads me into 7 suggestions that I'll give you about all of this. This is where it's going to get really super practical. 7 suggestions for you. The first suggestion is this: I encourage you to make a list of the grant makers and add to it constantly. Now, we alluded to that in module number 1. In this module, I'm going to show you really what some of that should look like. Suggestion number 2 is make a note of how much you think they will give. Now notice that, how much you think. So sometimes that's going to adjust as you get better information. In fact, all of this is going to adjust other than their name as you get better information. You want to make a note of how much you think they give, the kind of grants and kind of things they will fund, the kind of application they require, whether it's online or whether it's mail in, and you want to make a note of any other thing that you learn about them. Number 3, and I'm going to show you what all this looks like in a moment. It's super simple. You want to review your list each month and you want to work on the next month that is due. So we're not reviewing everything on the spreadsheet. We're going to simply look at next month. So if grants are due September 15th, then we want to work on them in the month of August. So generally, in my world, I'm looking at everything about a month and a half ahead. It makes no sense. In fact, you can't sometimes get even into the online portal until it's closer to time because they don't open it up. And if you send it in 3, 4 months in advance, if it's a mail-in application, it might get lost. So you really want to kind of be very timely and get it there when it makes sense. And so that means just pay attention to the timelines. But let me show you what some of this looks like. Now, this is old. This is what I was using about a decade ago when I was working at the nonprofit, but this really hasn't uh, changed at all. And you can scan this. You can look at some of these, and you can see, okay, over on the left side, here's the name of the grant makers. And I knew that these were all due on February 1st. Now, if they're due on February 1st, when do I write and when do I send them in? Well, I've got to get them in before February 1st. That's why I'm looking at these December and January. I do want you to notice something like Coca-Cola. You can apply to them at any time, but I'd gotten inside information that, hey, February is the best time. Um, Daniel Foundation, that one was due mid-February. So Ford Foundation, they didn't actually have a deadline, but what I'd done is I'd inserted some of these in because they did not have a deadline, and so I knew, hey, February tends to be a light month, and so I'm going to slide in some that don't have a deadline that I can apply to at any time, and I'm going to fill my tank here, my workflow with grants, so that every month I'm sending out a certain amount. I'll explain that in a moment. Here's the kind of application they want. Well, Coke wants online. The Alabama Power Satellite Office, not Alabama Power Foundation, but the satellite offices can give you money. They wanted your power company probably the same way. Didn't know when the deadline was. So I said, hey, let's research it and make sure, but let's apply to them in February. Here's the deal. If you get the deadline wrong, no, and you take a shot at it, hey, you still told them about your project and they'll write you back. They'll let you know. And that's when you pick up the phone and go, oh, thank you so much. You build a relationship. Ford, mail it in. Honda, online. Kellogg, online. Matthew 6-2 Fund, mail it in. Pelikas Foundation, mail it in. Protective, they want a letter of inquiry first. Look, they've got random dates. It seems random. Stalworth, WEDC, Xerox, mail it in. Now, again, this data is probably not up to date. This is a spreadsheet that's several years old. Notice what I was writing. I would always kind of project out and go, okay, next time I write, I'm going to write for, now this was the name of a program we had going on at that nonprofit. I would also put, other notes that I had. So like this is a company right here that's not a grant maker at all. They help people get grants. But I would know, hey, early winter, I need to reach out to them because they will partner with me on a grant writing thing. And if we win it, they get a piece of it based on really some legitimate criteria. And there are people that will do that if you find out who they are. Let me show you another one. May. Notice this one's different. You can take a screenshot if you want to go through it. But I put the actual deadline is May, November. That means this person right here, Birmingham Auto Owners Association, they're going to appear on the November list. Notice this, BBVA, March, April, May. Now, I did learn application process is online, so I filled in that. Some of these others, McCabe, that was to mail it in. They didn't actually have a deadline. Now, notice Protective Life right there, they are on the May list. That's why I put this in here. They are also on the February list. So I knew, let's find them right there, closer to the bottom. You can see that. I knew that you could apply multiple times. And so I might apply multiple times to them. I also knew, I told you about government grants. I knew there were certain federal grants that were out at certain times that might fit in with what we were doing. So I had those listed kind of separate from these private charities and organizations. Now, if you look at September is a huge. March and September seem to be these massive months. And so here's what I learned to do. I'll probably repeat this later on is I would, uh, and again, this is the kind of spreadsheet that you might want to build. Just look at those categories up there. Uh, I would know that September was a busy month. So I want to write out in my world, I want to write out at least for what we're doing as our organization. I wanted to write out at that time about $100,000 to $150,000 in grants a month. Now I get it. There are organizations that do a lot more, some that do a lot smaller. That's kind of the lane that we were in. I knew I wasn't going to get all of them. I get a percentage of them. I'm going to write out about 100,000. Well, this month you've got all these that have actual deadlines. And so in that month, I'm going to focus on deadlines. Actually, in August, I'm going to focus on writing the September grants that have deadlines. But when you see some of these other months and go, well, it seems like, February, it doesn't have a lot that are due in February. March is going to have a lot. So in February, I'm going to write the March deadlines because March is a heavy month. But in January, I'm going to write the February 1st due dates. This is the due date, to be clear. So you can figure out how to name this and organize this on your own. I always had it listed by the due date. So I would say I'm going to fill in all these others that don't have a due date that I can write anytime. That means every single month, my workload, it's the same. I don't have certain months where it's like, oh man, I'm writing every day, all day, so long doing this. Because no, remember, promise was you could do this ultra part-time and create a pace and workflow where you get the work done. I want to show you this too. I had a separate list that was for in-kind donations. So I knew that all of these different places, again, this is when I was writing for an organization that I was leading. We were helping people come off drugs, off the streets, out of prison, human trafficking. So we're housing. So I knew I can write all these people wood for bunks, in-kind donations. No deadline. I'd fill it in whenever I could. Hyundai vehicle, they did have a deadline. We got a vehicle from Honda, not Hyundai. Honda had a deadline at different times, but you start looking at this and going, okay, I can break this down. I can create a system. So first 3 of 7 suggestions, make a master list, add to it constantly, make that note of how much you think they will give or what they'll give, the kind of application you just saw that, review that list each month and work ahead. Name the deadline when it is, work ahead. Here's suggestion number 4. Spend 1 to 2 days per month doing nothing but grant requests all day. Get in it, stay in it. It is so much easier to write 4 or 5 of them back to back to back to back to back because they're all asking the same questions than it is to do it today. Take 2 hours. Got to get it out tomorrow. Got to do it again. Got to do it the next day. It's like, no, I'll tell you this. You can write 5 in the amount of time that it normally takes to write 2 if you're doing the 2 separately. Why? Because you got your computer open. Why? Because you got your head open. Your brain is in that space and you can just start humming. So set that time aside and just jam on it 1 to 2 days a month. Number 5, keep good records of what you apply for and what they accept, what they reject. 75% of the time, you're not going to hear back from all of them. I'd love to say that you would. 75% of the time, you will hear back and they will say, fund for this. So, in fact, we don't fund for organizations like yours at all. And you take them off the list or put them on another list so that if you're working somewhere else in the future, they might fund what you're doing. Or if you bump into somebody that needs what they fund, you can make the referral. Or they will say, hey, we don't fund for that amount. You need to apply for less. One time I was, I sent a request to a local insurance company, not life insurance, health insurance here in the Birmingham area. And the guy that ran the foundation, he gave me a call and he said, hey, you applied for 5,000. We just don't have that typically. We give 2,500 to 3,000. But if you'll resubmit this request, I'll go ahead and push it through. Well, I mean, goodness, like I changed my record based on that. So I've had grant makers say, hey, apply for more. I've had them say apply for less. But you don't ever know until you keep that spreadsheet, keep that data, and then just keep working from that. And then consequently, we got multiple grants from that guy. I've got multiple grants from them at multiple organizations. Sixth suggestion is follow up with everyone. Everyone. They generally tell you how long it takes to get a decision. So you can go ahead and build a relationship with the gatekeepers. So follow up right there with everybody. I would not follow up with them before they said you would hear from them. But, you know, 2 to 3, 4 weeks after you should have heard from them, that's when you want to follow up. And you can get some feedback. Hey, a lot of times it won't be about you at all. It'll be, hey, they'd already kind of determined where these grants were going to go. Yeah, hey, no problem. Do you mind if I stay in touch? I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Or they'll say, hey, you had a great request, but they really didn't feel like you supplied enough information here. Oh man, that's great feedback. Put that in your file, in your spreadsheet, and next time, correct it. Here's the seventh suggestion, and this is a game changer. Send the same or similar grant requests. Send the same or similar grant requests to all grant makers. Send the same or similar. What does that mean? A lot of times I talk to people and they go, well, man, I'm gonna write 10 grants this month. Most of them don't do that. Most of them write like 1 or 2 because they think that you got to write a different one from every foundation that you're sending to. No, send the same thing to all of them. Something very similar. If you've got let's just use our number $100,000 project again. Man, send it to 10 foundations and ask them all for $10,000, or send it to 20 foundations and ask them for $10,000. 20 foundations ask for $10,000 for it would be $200,000 in a request for a $100,000 project. You're not going to get funded by them all. Half of them, at least. In fact, I would say probably if you're hitting 5 to 10% of the request or saying yes, man, you're doing great. So send the same thing. When I was working at the Village, that was the nonprofit, I had 4 requests that I wrote. 4 great requests that people would fund, and I just rotated. So if I wrote to one grant maker this year, in March, just saying, I would have, if they funded it, great. I can't apply to them until next year. The next year, I would send them request number 2. If they rejected it, then in the next time I wrote, I would send them request number 3. The next time I would send them request number 4, and I would literally just work through it. I had them all on a different schedule of what I was requesting. And so you think about that, every 2 to 3 years, I'm updating and repeating and tweaking those same requests based on progress that we've made over the past 2 to 3 years. But I'm still sending the same request. Right now with Crosswinds Foundation for Faith and Culture, I've got 3 requests that I'm rotating. So about every 6 to 9 months, some of these grant makers get a request, and then, you start doing that. I'm sending them something every 6 to 9 months. So that means in about 2 years, somewhere in that lane, they're going to get an updated, similar request, but you're not having to come up with all of this stuff. All right. So now module 3, when and how to apply and how often.